everybody.
Hello.
If you don't know me, my name is Officer Avery, and I'm a police officer in the town of Hudson. And believe it or not, I've been here 15 years, already 15 years. So
Wow.
I say that I have the coolest job at the police department, and here's the reason why. Not only do I get to do all the cool stuff that regular police officers get to do, like investigate crimes and respond to emergency calls and arrest bad guys, but when there's not a pandemic, I get to be in the schools teaching kids. I teach the DARE program. So I think that I have the best job at the police department because I get to do all the cool police stuff and I get to spend my day with kids. So I get to learn a little bit of everything. And at our police department, we have a whole lot of different specialized units. And one of the units that we have is called the crime scene team. And I'm lucky because I get to be a member of the crime scene team. And we get what's called cross-trained in different kinds of techniques. And I'm going to show you some of those techniques today and talk about some of the things that we do. And I actually have a degree in photography. I went to college for that. So, and criminal justice. A lot of times when we respond to crime scenes, I end up doing the photography mainly, which is pretty neat. So departments in the state that are smaller, they don't get to have their own crime scene team like we do. So we're very lucky in Hudson because we have our own crime scene van. Has anybody seen the crime scene van before that we have?
No.
No. So it's pretty neat. Maybe one day when we're over the pandemic, I'll be able to give you guys a tour when you're interested. Old Homes Days, we usually park it there. So you might have seen it there before. It looks just like a plain white van that says Hudson Police, but we have all sorts of cool stuff in the back that we use when we respond to crimes. So I'm going to go over some of the stuff that I think that's really neat that you're going to like. One of the things I want to talk to, did anybody do the fossil class for the library? I heard that some of the kids did a fossil class.
Yep, I did.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So this is right up your alley. So imagine that you're a crime scene officer and you're responding to a break-in at a business. Sometimes what do people leave behind on the ground?
Clues?
Yeah, what kind of clues?
Footprints?
Yes, footprints, exactly. Believe it or not, we have a way to cast and tire impressions because that, believe it or not, helps us solve a crime. So I'm going to explain how, and I'm going to get a little closer because I actually have an example of a casting.
Wow, that's so cool.
So this is actually a police boot, but believe it or not, every single person's shoes are unique. The way I stand and I walk and I run, and the way you stand and you walk and you run is very unique. So if you look at your shoe on your foot, you can do it now or you can do it later. Some of us walk on the outside of our foot. So the side of the boot would be maybe thinner, more worn down. Some of us walk on our heels more. So our heel impressions would be walked down on more. So every single sneaker impression is different.
Okay.
Cool. So the way that we do this when we cast a footprint impression is probably pretty similar to what you did when you did the fossil class. So we have this stuff, believe it or not, it's dental stone. Has anybody ever had a dental impression in their mouth before? Some of us have. So,
No.
it's this special stuff that we pour in. It looks kind of like pancake batter, and you mix it together and it with water. Have you ever made pancakes?
Yes.
I love making pancakes.
Yes, me too. So you kind of know when you mix it together, it's kind of thicker. And then you slowly pour it into the ground where that footprint impression is, and you let it dry. And then eventually when it's dry enough, and you can lift the whole thing up and it comes up exactly like this. And another thing that's really neat about that is people leave footprint impressions in the snow too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might think like, how do I pour something that looks like pancake batter into the snow without making it melt? We use air spray and we spray the snow where the footprint impression is, and it hardens it. And then we pour that dental stone in. And when you're done, you have a perfect impression like this one.
That's creepy.
It's creepy. I love science. If you like science, then you'd be very good at crime scene stuff because it's all about using different techniques about science, different ways that you learn about science to solve crimes and to help people, which is pretty neat. So if you remember, I explained to you that when you go to a crime scene, you know, we leave all sorts of stuff behind, right? Hairs and fibers. Some of us have dogs. Does anybody here have a dog or a cat that's watching?
I have 4 pets.
I do.
I have a
All
cat.
I have a dog.
You have a dog?
Yeah.
I have a very fluffy dog, and his fur is always on me. So when we leave someplace, believe it or not, sometimes that dog or that cat hair falls off of you. So that's something that we would use tape to pick it up with the tape. You know, sticky. That's something that you could practice. You could wrap tape around your 2 fingers, and you could go like this on your clothes and see what comes up and look at it under a magnifying glass. And it sounds pretty simple, but that's a technique that we use when we go to crimes. So, you know, we talked about how footprints are unique, right? And how the impressions on the bottom of our feet are unique. And now we're going to talk about another thing that's unique. When you're at a crime scene and you're a bad guy, do you think you're probably nervous sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah. What happens when you get nervous to your body?
You sweat.
You sweat, right? Everybody sweats. And even if you wear gloves, sometimes if you're a bad guy, you can sweat through your gloves. And that's the way that we use to catch bad guys. When you sweat, you're touching stuff and you're leaving fingerprints behind. So what I want you to do is, I want you to think about this. Fingerprints are like snowflakes, okay? So no 2 fingerprints in the world are just like how no 2 snowflakes are the same. You could have an identical twin and your fingerprints are going to be the same. There are 3 different types of patterns of fingerprints. I'm going to hold this up so you can see. See what they look like? Rolls and arches. Yeah, it's weird, right? Doesn't it look like a painting kind of? So what I want you to do is I want you to look at your hand. Okay. And I want to challenge you to figure out which of these you have in your hands. Do you have loops? Do you have whirls? Do you have arches? And
I have whirls. I have whirls.
Let me see. What do I have? I have loops.
I have whirls.
Loops.
I have whirls. I have whirls.
You can have more than one kind too. And the
One
fingerprint,
hand and arches on the other.
the fingerprints that you're born with are the fingerprints you're always going to have. And when you are in your mom's belly, your fingerprints
I have either loops or
are set in stone. You have your fingerprints when you are a very, 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 very young baby in your mom's belly. It's kind of amazing when you think about that. No 2 fingerprints are ever the same, just like snowflakes, right? So those are unique and identical children, and nobody else can duplicate them, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to show you some stuff that we do for crime scenes and do a way that you can do it at home if you want to practice. Sound good?
I have whirls.
Here's the all right, so
I just have whirls and loops.
we use something called fingerprint dust, and we have all sorts of different colors. And I'm going to show you up close what it looks like. So here's an example of a really bright color. They come in all different colors. This one is kind of like a fluorescent red. We have white, we have gray, we have black. And who thinks they know? What do you think this is made out of? You're going to be surprised when you find out. It's really cool.
Dust.
Wax.
No, close.
Sand?
Oh, you're getting closer. Think about the movie Moana.
Flour?
No,
Quartz stone.
it's made out of, are you guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
Volcanic ashes.
No.
Isn't that crazy? So this stuff goes everywhere.
Yeah.
This stuff goes everywhere. This special dust
volcanic acid. Yeah, so it's
wet in people's fingerprints. So what we do when we go to a scene is we have brushes that we use that are made feathers, very, very soft. An example of one. See, I used that one before because it has the red dust. And all we do is we put a little bit on it and then dust the surface. And this special dust that is made out of volcanic ashes sticks directly to oils in somebody's fingerprints. And that's how we can see if a fingerprint is on a surface.
It's really cool.
That explains why charcoal sticks to my fingers so easily when there's a fire.
So we have all sorts of different colors. Like I just showed you hot pink. We have gray. We have a gray color. We have white colors. Why do you think we have different colors? The kind of stuff that we're fingerprinting.
different fingerprints.
Not for different
Different
fingerprints.
colors are so they show up better on different surfaces.
Yes, I just heard a good answer.
You can't come in.
So if I'm fingerprinting in black, I would probably want to use pink or white fingerprint dust, right? Because if I put black fingerprint dust directly on something that's black, I'm not gonna be able to see if there's a fingerprint there, right?
Yeah.
That's what all different kinds of. So then what we do is, if you have a fingerprint, and you can do this at home, I'm gonna teach you how to do this at home. You don't need fancy stuff. I'm gonna teach you how to do your own. We have these hinge lifters. Get close so you can see them. It just looks like plastic. One side is sticky like tape, and we peel it off. And then we stick it to the fingerprint and peel it off the table. And then our fingerprint is right here on this. So then we can leave a crime scene and we can submit this into evidence. So if we make an arrest and we have to go to court, we have evidence now, right? Because sometimes you can't take like a whole door. I mean, you could take a whole door if you don't want to. So you could just take the fingerprint from there and it's stuck inside of here and it's taped inside so that it's safe. Which is pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to teach you guys a way to do this on your own. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
if you scavenger hunt later, I have fingerprint kits for you guys to try at home with ink. But what you can do on your own is if you take plain paper, just plain computer paper at home, and you sharpen a pencil, and you take the side of the pencil and you go like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've done that.
And then you rub your fingerprint, rub your thumb across that carbon from the pencil. You touch something, you're going to leave your fingerprint. And then you can just take a regular piece of Scotch tape, put it on the print and slowly lift it up. And you just fingerprinted yourself and saved your print. So all you need is plain tape and a carbon pencil.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a technique that you can try at home.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had a backyard fire last night, and so we have ashes, real ashes.
Oh, you could try that.
Perhaps
you
not
can-
volcanic ones, though.
That's okay. What you could do first is take your thumb and you could like rub it across your forehead or like near your nose where your oils on your face are. And then you could put your print down and then you could dust it.
That's right.
Sometimes that works. It makes it a little easier if you're just learning.
Squeezes right here.
So that's pretty neat. So we also have, like I showed you the clear tape that we use. We also have black backgrounds that we use if we're lifting a print with that hot pink color, and we also have a fluorescent green color that we use. Then you put the whole print, like if it's a hand print, put it on this black background. So it's kind of like arts and crafts sometimes, which I really like. Neat. Another thing that we do when we go to crime scenes is the first thing we do is we look at everything, which can be hard, right? Because sometimes being patient is difficult. So, so when we're on the crime scene team, we always work in partners. What we do is we just figure out whose job is what. So my partner sometimes will be the photographer, or sometimes I'll be the photographer. And we walk around each other with a pad of paper. And this is something that you could do at home if you wanted to set up your own investigation at home. And you have a friend or a sister or a brother or a cousin or a mom or a dad with you. And one person writes down everything as you take a picture of it. And we use evidence markers. Have you guys ever seen these on TV before?
Yes.
Yep.
So we use evidence markers so that we know exactly where our evidence is. And every single one of them is numbered so we know the sequence where they are. So it helps us to document it when we write our police report. And then I'm not sure if you can see. Can you see the ruler on the bottom?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All of the markers have a ruler on the bottom so we can get the exact scale of the size of whatever it is that we've decided is evidence. So it helps us a lot that way. It's just another way for us to stay organized. So there's that. So let's say we've found our evidence. Let's say the evidence is a knife. Knives are sharp and dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We have to make sure that we're careful with them. What do you think we should put it in? If we're a police officer and we're taking
A bag.
well, I don't know. A bag seems like it might rip. First, I have to put my gloves on, right? Because I don't want to put my fingerprints on the knife. So I'm going to put my gloves on. I'm sure you guys have seen these a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
Wearing my gloves so that I don't put fingerprints on the evidence because I don't want to get myself in trouble, right? What else do you think we could put a knife in other than a bag so that we don't get hurt?
What about a box of padding?
A sterile plastic tube.
I got some smart people in this group today. A sterile plastic tube, ladies and gentlemen. And somebody said padding. It has foam padding at the. So this is something that we use when we get maybe like needles, knives, who knows what else, an object that could potentially harm somebody. We put in these tubes, and then we use evidence tape. So I'm going to get a little closer so you can see it because, believe it or not, this tape is very expensive and it's very special tape because it is extremely thin. This tape is so thin that you can barely put it on without ripping it in half and getting it stuck all over your fingers. A little messy. And there's a reason why we use this kind of tape. That's so that when we seal our evidence or an envelope, nobody can tamper with it. Do you guys know what tamper means?
Mess with.
Exactly. So once we have our tape, let's say I'm putting some evidence in an envelope. This is exactly the way it looks at our police department when we secure it. So we put evidence tape on the top and the bottom because those are two spots that you can open it. You want to make sure that the top and the bottom are both sealed.
Wait. I've seen that once in the Blippi video.
Yeah. Sometimes you see it on TV shows. That's how accurate it is. And I seal it on the top and the bottom so that nobody can open it and mess with it, right? Tamper with it. And then if you look up close, I put my initials and I put my badge number on it. Okay. We usually put a case number or the date on it as well, but I just put my initials and my badge number on it. And I don't know if you can see it clearly here. See how part of my initials and my number and the date, see how part of it is on the red tape and part of it is on the envelope?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody were to try to open this envelope and then stick the tape down, they wouldn't be able to get away with it, would they?
No.
Nope.
If you try to rip that tape, you've completely messed up the alignment of all those words or all those numbers, right? So that's the reason to prove that once the evidence is sealed in a bag or an envelope or whatnot, there's no way to open it up. Once it's in there for good, and it gets locked into our evidence room. And there's only one evidence custodian. So somebody that works in our detectives division that's allowed to go in and organize the evidence. That's pretty neat, right? And all this is just a plain manila envelope, but that's something that we use to stay organized. So if you were to, if you were going to go set something up at home and pretend to be saving stuff, you could be putting in envelopes. And that's the special tape that we use. And I'll take my gloves off for a minute so I can show you how thin it is when you peel it. So it has two little backings on it. I just want to make sure I'm getting in here good enough for you to see.
Wow, that is thin.
And like, I'm barely, look at it's sticking to my finger. I barely touched it.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's so thin. And, there's a reason why it's expensive. So that's one of the things that we use, which is pretty neat. So So before I get into the scavenger, does anybody have any questions about anything so far that I've shown?
Yes, I have a question.
So say your name first so that I know who I'm talking to.
This is Jeremiah Hughes.
Oh, okay. All right. And what's your question?
My question is, I'm wondering if I know that no handwriting is exactly alike, but what if the thief happened to have some of that type of tape, and he opened up the old folder, changed the evidence, and then copied exactly what the writing on that folder and things like that, because there are people who are able to do that.
That's a good question. I've never run into a question like that before. Well, the good thing is that when you seal it, it has the badge number and the date and the location that you put it at. And if anything ever goes to court, you as the officer would testify like that's I didn't touch that. So, and like I said, that's why we only have one person in charge of the evidence. That way things don't get tampered with and they're placed in a secure location and nobody has access to it. Never had that happen. That sounds like something that might happen in a movie though.
I've hardly ever watched TV. We got rid of our TV when I was 2.
Oh, maybe you read a lot. You have a very good imagination.
My brother has a question though.
Okay, go right ahead.
What is forensics?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's hard to hear you.
What is forensics?
Oh, so I know I should have used a smaller word. So when we talk about forensics, we talk about like crime scene techniques. So different ways that you can use science to solve crimes. We talked about how the science of lifting fingerprints, there's a science behind taking photographs. There's a science behind using the dental stone to lift casted foot impressions or tire impressions. So when we talk about forensics, it's just different ways that we're using science to help us secure different kinds of evidence. Your question? Yes, I hope. That's a really good question.
I have a question.
All right, is it Elise?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
What happens if the criminal puts on gloves so you can't see his finger?
So that's a great question. Sometimes that does happen, but when you're wearing gloves, criminals are still sweating, right?
Yeah.
So if you can get sweat through gloves. Had that happen before. And luckily, science technology now is so advanced and so amazing that people can solve crimes even using gloves. And that brings me to another point. When we lift fingerprints, let's say I use my Hinge Lifters and I lifted prints off to the state lab. So there's a lab in Concord, New Hampshire, person that works there, and their job is only to analyze fingerprints. That job. They must be very good at puzzles. What they do is they look at loops, whorls, and arches, and their job is to just look at these fingerprints. We give them matching fingerprints of who we think the suspect or the bad guy of the crime is. Their job is to look at them and to look at all of the fingerprints and see if there's any what they would call identifying markers. Tell you if these fingerprints that I sent match the person that we think is the bad guy.
Okay.
So that's their job. Can you imagine that as a job? They must be very detail oriented.
Yeah, it must be very hard.
Yes. Well, there is computer programs that they have access to as well that help to show it. You might be able to look it up with your parents on the internet. There are computer programs that help to overlay fingerprints and show what matches, like if it's a match or if it's not, but they do still have to go through a human, go through the identifying markers and say if it's a match or not.
I have a question.
Okay, is it you?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
What do you do if how do you figure out which evidence could be planted or which evidence is real?
Wow, you guys are really smart. These are great questions. So there's trainings that we go to as police officers on the crime scene team from people that are professionals in this. Like their job isn't a police officer. Their only job is they go and they teach forensics, and they'll tell you we go through what's called studies. So once a case goes to court and it's totally been cleared and the person's either been arrested, sent to jail, or the case was dismissed, they show us evidence and they teach us what to look for. So they teach us if something was planted, what it would look like, the angles of things that would be placed. Why do you think this is real? Why do you think this is fake? So there's a lot of studying that we have to do when we become crime scene techs in Hudson and in any other agency to learn what the markers are for that. So along with what you were saying, if you are pretending to be the victim of a crime and you plant evidence and then you get caught for planting evidence, then that's a crime and then you would get in trouble. So that's a really good question.
Thanks.
Anybody else have questions? So we use a lot of other stuff too. Does anybody here like to sketch or draw?
Yep.
Me. I do.
So I'm not very good at drawing, so I don't normally do this. Usually it's one of my other partners. But believe it or not, part of going to a crime scene is just looking first and not touching anything. And you make a diagram with a key. Do you guys know what that means when you make a key?
Yes.
Like anything in yellow is this, anything in red is this. So somebody does a diagram exactly of what the crime might look like, and they make their own key. They use measuring tape to measure, where in the room this and that was, so that if somebody were to clean up the crime scene later, we can go back to the sketch. And if we wanted to recreate it, then we would be able to. So that's another thing that you could do. If you like sketching, you would be really good at that. And if you like photography, I know everybody's got these like fancy iPhones now. If you like, we don't use iPhones, we use a professional camera. You could also take pictures of crime scenes too. So we take a lot of pictures. Picture and it comes out blurry, we have to save it, we can't delete it. Because if it goes to court, we don't want a judge to say, these aren't in order, what happened? We can't tell a judge, well, we deleted this picture. Bad pictures, we have to keep them just in case.
I have one other question.
Sure.
What if there's one piece of evidence that contradicts all the other stuff?
Oh, do you watch crime shows? You're very smart.
No, but I've watched this show. It's called Once Upon a Time, and there's like tons of crime and stuff.
I've heard of it.
It's really
okay,
good.
so your question was, what if there's evidence? So the evidence never lies, right? If somebody didn't plant it or somebody did, then it would be our job to figure out why it contradicts all the other. So it would be our job to figure out why. So sometimes like a crime it would appear like it could be like a murder, but really it's not a murder. It's our job to investigate why this evidence contradicts each other. At the end of the day, that's the science behind all of the stuff that we're talking about, is how you find out the truth. I mean, sometimes you find out the truth because a suspect decides that they want to check, right? And then it's our job as crime technicians and as police officers to find the story and the evidence so that we can know if the person's telling the truth. The evidence match what they're saying, right? And if it's another story, we might be able to figure out that maybe the person is lying.
That's cool.
So, like I said, I geek out to this stuff because I love science. I think science is cool. And I'm very hands-on. I've never been the kind of person that could just like sit all day behind a desk, read and type. To be out there doing stuff and touching stuff and getting my hands dirty. So have you made mache or anything like that with glue and?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's kind of what I think about when I think about the sneaker impression that we talked about. There's also things that you can use at home to practice.
I have 2 questions.
Okay, Megan.
So, how many people are allowed on the crime scene team?
Oh,
Thank
that's a good question. So we have a team A and a team B.
Mm-hmm.
We don't say like, oh, there can only be this many. So usually is an opening. We want to make sure it's somebody that's interested in it, right? Because if somebody's interested in something, they're going to want to do a really good job. And the reason why there's 2 teams is because we're always on call. So let's say 6 people on team A with me, then we would be on call any hour of the night for the whole month of August. So the whole month of August, if a crime comes in at 3:00 in the morning, then the people from team A would get called in. And then in September, team B would be on call. That was turns. So there's a lot. There's probably like 12 or 15 officers on it. Is that answer? You had another question, right, Megan?
Yeah. So if the crime scene was like killing an animal like out of season, because I watch crime shows. Would you
Okay.
be looking for bullet shells and gunpowder and stuff?
Yeah. So do you watch Northwoods Law?
Yes.
Yeah. So I watch that too sometimes because I think it's pretty neat that there's in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I've met some of the officers on that show before.
I have too.
Oh, that's so cool. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you would be looking for a bullet casing. So, different guns look different ways when you shoot them, but if you shoot casing, yeah. So, depending on where the casing lands, you'd be able to tell where the person was possibly standing.
Yeah.
With the animal, and if it's out of season. And we have fish and game officers that help with investigations like that. A lot of times they take over investigations like that because people call them first.
Yeah.
So, and then if this is something that you guys think that you're really interested in this someday, I always tell people, big agencies, like if you were to be in like Florida or Boston, New York, there are people that are only crime scene techs. So they don't do police work too. They just do all this cool stuff. And you can have your parents or your grandparents show you online. If you look up the State of New Hampshire State Lab in Concord, they have their own website. And when there's not a pandemic, usually tours. So you get to see all the cool stuff that they use there, like more in depth. Like you'd be able to go in person and get a tour, which is.
Yeah, I also watch Lone Star Law. It's based out of Texas.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, it's technically the same thing, just they're based out of Texas.
All right. So does anybody have any questions about this stuff?
Yeah, I have one more question. What if the person, the criminal, like washes their footprint behind them?
How would you do that?
I don't know. Take them off?
Well, if they didn't have, okay, so if they weren't wearing sneakers and they were just barefoot, their barefoot impression would be in and I'd still be able to cast it, right?
Yeah.
And your feet wear, right? Because everybody's feet are different. So that's a really good question. You guys are really smart. I feel like for a Monday morning, I'm like very, very, very impressed.
I have a question.
Or what if they wear crutches?
Oh, if they had crutches, that's good.
Walk on crutches.
I know who I'd be looking for, right? I'd be looking for a criminal that broke their foot. How did I know you guys would be full of good questions? All right, who else has a question?
I do.
Okay, Charlotte, go ahead.
Me. What about if they have if they're on something and then you can't find what happened?
What do you mean?
Like if they're on something that has like a pad.
Oh, like a sled or a ski? Is that what you mean? No? I don't know. I think we lost her. Did we lose you?
But she's asking if they mean like they're on a sled.
What do you mean when you say a pad? You mean like driving in a car?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a really good question. So tires all come from different companies. And there's ways for us to track them as well. And the people in the state lab check all the fingerprints. Remember I told you about the person that has the super important job to take fingerprints?
Yeah.
They're trained to look at tire impressions too. So I've actually been at crime scenes in before where we haven't necessarily had footprints, but we've had good tire impressions. So a tire has rolled on the ground and left marks. and we've casted like a large portion of tire treads, and to measure the width of the tire. And then we can send that in, and the person at the state lab can tell us these tires belong to this kind of vehicle, and this is the company that makes it, and this is where you could find it. So if we have a suspect, we could those tires match those impressions. So that's a really good question.
I have one other question.
Sure.
I looked it up. Is it the forensic laboratory or the public health one?
Forensic laboratory, yeah, in Concord.
Wow, that's a big website.
Yeah, they do a lot of
We have a
important stuff.
question.
Lydia and Alex? Yep, go ahead.
What if the criminal notices that he has fingerprint and he wants
What you broke up, but I think what you said is, what if the criminal sees their fingerprints and then they wash it away? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So think about it. Think about how many, this is what I want you to do today. I want you to think about how many things you touch in just 1 hour. There's no way to wash away all of your fingerprints. I mean, I'm just thinking about the stuff I'm touching while I'm talking to you guys. If you time yourself for 1 hour, let's say, think about all the stuff you touch, even when you try not to touch stuff. It's not possible to walk into a room and not leave anything behind. You're always going to leave something behind. It might be dog fur from your clothes, right? Like we talked about, or your hair. Your hair falls when you walk. It doesn't seem like it does, but it does. If you were to take tape, like I said, wrap it around your fingers, maybe go on your couch, vacuum your floor until it's totally clean, and then try to do it, you're going to see some sort of trace evidence behind.
Yeah.
So,
I suppose that in the case of the really tidy criminal who disposes of his things, the police also look in the trash, don't they?
yes, you can look at the trash in a house if you have a search warrant. Laws. If your trash is outside, you have to have a search warrant to look through stuff like that. So sometimes crime scene shows are true and sometimes they're not. And sometimes it's just different states that have different laws about like what an officer is allowed to look at without a search warrant. So that's a really good question though. All right, so I'm going to sign off for now. Okay, guys? Thank you for watching.
Let's do it.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.